So, we love hearing new voices here at Talking Tales, and tonight, unfortunately, we're denied that particular pleasure because Lina Katzmarcik has spent most of the week struggling to find her voice. So, her story, Peanut Gallery, is going to be read by Tom. Very grateful for Tom for doing that, despite strepsils and gargling with diesel and everything else that Lina's tried. Unfortunately, she's just not been able to make it. But you'll like this story because it's a story that brings a tea and TV, and I like it in particular because it reminded me of a game I've not played since 1979. So please welcome Tom reading Peanut Gallery.
4 minutes and 37 seconds later than yesterday, I pull into the drive. I caught 2 red traffic lights on the way back from work, so by the time I park my car, the radio clock tells me it's 8:49 and 37 seconds. My phone agrees. I get out of the car, slam the door and stand in our driveway, looking at the blacked out kitchen windows, and further up to the first floor where shivery blue light dances over thin white curtains. I enter and hear voices that belong to nobody in this house. The TV is already on. The sofa is L-shaped, the colour of limestone on a rainy day. My mother is closest to where I stand in the backlight of the doorway. She's lying spread out, a blanket wrapped around her slender body, a tangle of limbs and fabric like the messy bundles of brown and black and red I pulled out of the tumble dryer this morning. Mum doesn't look up. Her mouth is half open, which makes her look less intelligent but more approachable than her real self. Pressed against her left side, one leg resting alongside my mother's, the other dangling uncertainly off the couch, is my younger sister. I know that she'll make various attempts at fitting the second leg on the sofa too, but like a doomed mountain goat, it will keep slipping off until she'll groan, defeated, and sit upright, tucking both legs underneath herself, almost as if to trap them. She looks up at me, brown eyes flitting away from the flurry of colour on the TV screen. You're late. Traffic. Shh. My mother's eyes never leave the screen, but even without eye contact, her sharp hiss shames my sister and myself into bashful silence. We exchange glances, half repentant, half conspiratorial, and I hover in the doorway until the frown of my mother's face smooths itself out and her eyebrows slink from a tight-knit back into a soft arch. It's safe to enter, but I wait for a few beats still. Watch my dad at the far end of the sofa, glasses slightly askew on his sharp nose as he sits reading the paper. The thin sheets rest completely still between his fingers, not the slightest tremor or riffle, like he's a statue, a reminder of generations long gone. The empty expanse of sofa between him and the others is bathed in feeble darkness, and the dusty golden light that pours over him and his paper tinges his skin the colour of fading sepia photographs. It further offsets the stark contrast between him and my mother and sister, whose faces seem to contort and flicker, grow and shrink in the coruscating light of the TV screen, even though their expressions never change, even though their expressions are just as set as my father's, their fingers just as still. I suppose I should find my spot somewhere in the dusky twilight zone, on the empty pillows between burnt sienna and scintillating technicolor. But I don't, and I never do. Instead, lowering myself to the floor by my mother's feet, far enough to her right that she can see the screen over my head. My father reads, the soap opera continues to ooze out of the TV, covering the dark parquet floor of the living room in sticky dramas that make my mother and my sister forget their own for a while. I can't commit to either, so I stare into the bright screen and squeeze my eyes shut until I see circles of colour, all shades of blue and green and pink, dancing and shrinking and expanding on the back of my eyelids. I wait impatiently for the ad break, but tonight it never comes. Instead of launching into a kaleidoscopic array of adverts, the screen turns black, turns silent. Nobody says a word. And for minutes, or maybe seconds, we each sit in our separate pools of light until my father shakes his sepia paper out and places it on the coffee table before crossing the dining room to fiddle with the TV. Even though he never watches, it seems an unspoken understanding that he should be the one to figure out what's wrong now. He tries, but can't, and my mother soon joins him and they mutter at each other on the dead screen in tight-lipped whispers until my dad sighs and straightens up and shrugs. We will have to have someone come round tomorrow to look at it. I'll call them now, my mother says. It's too late today. Just to make sure they can fit us in tomorrow, I will call in the morning. Let's try again, I can hear the panic and the fluttery pauses between flimsy words. Tomorrow. My father always tends to speak in full stops, and tonight is no different. The room lapses back into silence. It's my sister who breaks it, and we all turn around to where she's lying on the sofa, both legs up this time. Why don't we just play a game? She asks it like it's nothing, like it's casual, and like playing a game is something we do here in this house. Nobody seems to know what to do, so she shakes her head and gets up, goes to the white cabinet next to my mother's side of the sofa and opens the door. I've never heard the sound of it creaking to reveal what's inside. The sound feels too loud and too real in this room of escapism. She turns around, clutching somewhat triumphantly a big square yellow box that makes her look tiny, her wrists so fragile I worry they might snap under the weight of the game. It's frustration. Remember, we used to play it when you were kids. My mum finishes her sentence. Something odd happens then. It seems like none of us think about it. We all just sit in the middle of the cream carpet. Around the board, my sister carefully unfolds, and it feels like our bodies automatically know where they belong. The TV is bereft of life behind our backs, and we don't find out whose baby it was, whether or not Sarah got her dream job, and whether or not Catherine really cheated on Paul. We don't get our daily reminder of the best pizza, the newest lipstick, or the best deals at Asda. Instead, I learn that my dad's favourite colour is green, like mine, that my mum tries to manipulate her way to victory by setting the rest of us against each other, and that she squeals like a child when we call her out. I learn that my sister is competitive, if not in life then at least in the game, and that she bites the bottom right corner of her lip when she's agitated. Suddenly, we're all the same colour, all underneath the same light. It seems like I can see the dust falling out of the creases of my dad's forehead, see them shower down his cheeks and melt in the warmth like wax shavings. I hardly remembered his smile, or the sound of my mother's real laugh, but they're touching now. A gentle shove, a mocking, soothing hand on a shaking shoulder as they laugh in stifled frustration. Halfway through the game, my mother's exasperation bubbles into words. Kick her out! You're supposed to kick her out! I've pardoned my sister again. Can't quite bring myself to do it, so I move another piece, avoiding hers. This is no fun. We all laugh, but in the briefly broken spell of the game, I sense my mother's rising agitation. I find it almost rub off on me until I realise that it must be time for the second outbreak now, in other households where other people sit in separate pools of light. Does anyone want tea, I ask, into the fading tales of our laughter. My mum catches my eye and there's a flicker of gratitude on her face. I'll go make it, she offers, and no sooner has she taken everyone's order, peppermint tea with honey, without, one with milk, her steps accelerate and quickly fade down the stairs. I'm the only one who shares her little secret. Every time the second outbreak comes on, she will excuse herself to either make tea or tidy up the kitchen, so she can, unseen by judging eyes, eat 3 of her treasured peanut butter cookies. I caught her once, and I'm not sure who was more uncomfortable when her cover was blown, and something as innocent as sugar at night suddenly felt like a clandestine breaking of unspoken rules. As soon as we hear the faint clattering from the kitchen, my dad, too, rises. He casts a quick glance towards the milky light of the doorway, then turns and steps out onto the balcony. I watch him pull a crushed packet of cigarettes out of his jeans pocket, and his shoulders narrow as he tenderly shelters a cigarette from the wind with a cupped hand, while he flicks the flame of his lighter to life with the other. A faint smell of tobacco mingles with the scent of leather, dust, and long untouched plastic from the game board in the living room. My sister scoots closer to where I'm still sitting cross-legged, somewhere between the cream carpet and the hardwood floor. My mother isn't here to shush us now, so we speak in subdued voices about my sister's day and mine, how I'm too worried about the future and she never enough. Her fingers half stroke, half cling onto mine, while her lowered lashes throw psychedelic shadows along her soft cheeks. As I watch her talk, I realise why I never kick her piece out of the game. For 5, maybe 10 minutes, my mum and my dad and us have floated into separate pools of light again, only my sister and I still sit close together. My dad doesn't mock my mother for the extra cookies, and she doesn't glare meaningfully at the glowing cigarette in his hand. They'll know later. She'll smell the nicotine on his fingers and he the peanuts on her breath, but it won't matter then. We all gather again in the warm light in the middle, casting shadows in the same direction and finish our game. Let's do this again tomorrow, my mother says when she folds up the board. Her cheeks are flushed and it almost looks like the amber light has given her an April sunburn. Let's. My dad hands her the lid and she closes the box. My sister and I are still giggling and our parents share a look of silent content, a look which ends with 2 smiles. We all scatter around the house then, find our own beds, our own darkness, each tinged differently by the angles at which the moon leaks through the cracks in our blinds. 3 minutes, and 17 seconds earlier than the day before I pull into the drive. No red lights this time. Blacked out kitchen windows, shivery blue light on the curtains. I know immediately that the box will remain closed tonight, and we'll each sit in our separate pools of light again, silently, and maybe we'll still find out whose baby it was, and whether or not Catherine really cheated. My sister's legs will slip off the couch, and I will sit at my mother's feet.